I've always believed that family is supposed to be the place you run to when the world becomes too heavy. The people you share blood with should be the ones who understand you, protect you, and love you without question. At least that's what I grew up thinking. But life has a way of teaching you lessons in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, those lessons come from the very people you thought would never hurt you. This story begins with something that should have been impossible. My sister asking something of me that no sibling should ever have to face. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about a favor. It wasn't even about emotional support. It was about a part of me, literally. A part of me she believed she was entitled to just because we were family. My sister Maya and I were never very close growing up. She was always the confident one, the loud one, the one who soaked up all the attention in every room she entered. I was the quiet child, the observer, the one who listened more than spoke. Still, we were family. We laughed at the same childhood jokes and shared the same memories of our parents' struggles. But as adults, we drifted apart. Life pulled us in different directions. She got married while I focused on my studies and my job. We didn't talk often, but we were never on bad terms. At least I thought so. Until one evening, everything changed. I remember that day clearly. I was sitting in my living room, sipping tea and scrolling through messages on my phone. A notification popped up from Maya. It had been months since we last spoke. Her message was short, urgent, and heavy. She said she needed to talk. Immediately. For a moment, my heart tightened. I thought maybe something had happened to our parents or that she was going through some emotional crisis. So I called her back right away. She answered on the first ring, sounding distressed and out of breath, as if she had been crying. But instead of explaining what was wrong, she asked me a question I never saw coming. She asked me to donate my kidney. Not to her, but to her husband. A man I had never met. A man I had never even spoken to. A complete stranger to me. She didn't ask with hesitation. She didn't ask gently. It was more like an expectation, like she was telling me what I needed to do, as if my body existed for her convenience. She told me her husband was very sick, that his kidney was failing, and that I was the best match in the family. I sat there in shock, unable to even form words. My mind couldn't make sense of what she was saying. How could I just give away an organ? How could she expect me to say yes within seconds? And why did she think I would? As she talked, her tone became sharper, almost accusing. She said that family sacrifices for each other. She said that if I loved her, I wouldn't think twice. She said that this was my chance to prove what family meant to me. But I was still speechless. I had never even met this man. I didn't know who he was, what kind of person he was, or how he had lived his life. And yet, I was being asked to give up something that could affect my own health forever. The more she spoke, the more I felt my stomach twist. None of this felt right. I tried to explain gently. I told her I needed time to think. I told her donating a kidney isn't like giving someone a ride or lending some money. It's permanent. It affects your body for the rest of your life. I told her I needed to understand the risks, talk to doctors, and consider everything carefully. But she didn't want to hear any of it. She accused me of being selfish. She said I was choosing my own comfort over someone's life. She said I was heartless. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I never imagined my own sister would speak to me like that. The conversation escalated quickly. Her tone changed from desperation to anger, from anger to entitlement. She started saying that since we were siblings, my kidney was basically hers. She said it was just a kidney, and that I could live with one. She even said that I owed her because she looked after me when we were children. I sat there, my phone pressed to my ear, feeling like I wasn't even part of the conversation anymore. It was like she had already decided who I was, what I owed, and what I should do with my own body, without any regard for my feelings. The call ended with her crying and yelling, and with me sitting in silence, feeling numb. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying her words again and again, wondering how we even got here. Days passed and she kept sending messages, long, emotional paragraphs, voice notes filled with tears, and sometimes even guilt-tripping reminders. She involved our parents. She involved relatives. Suddenly everyone was calling me, telling me that I was the only hope, that I needed to save someone's life, that refusing meant I was turning my back on my family. No one asked how I felt. No one asked what I wanted. It was like my voice didn't matter anymore. But I couldn't ignore what my heart was telling me. Something inside me said that this situation was not just about saving a life. It was about control. It was about expectation. It was about being used. It was about being pressured into making a sacrifice that wasn't mine to give. And in that moment, I realized something painful. Sometimes doing the right thing for yourself means being seen as the villain in someone else's story. So I made a decision. One that shocked everyone. One that broke my sister's image of me forever. I blocked her. Completely. Her number. Her social media. Every way she could reach me. Because I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to protect myself from being cornered into something I wasn't ready for. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because what happened after I blocked her, what came next, was something I could never have predicted. Changed everything. It revealed truths I never knew. It opened wounds I didn't know existed. And that is where the real story begins. After I blocked my sister, I expected silence. I thought everything would calm down, that people would stop calling, and I would finally have room to think clearly. But I was wrong. The silence I hoped for never came. Instead, it was replaced by confusion, worry, and a heaviness that followed me everywhere. I kept checking my phone even though I had blocked her. Part of me felt guilty and another part felt strangely relieved. It was like I had stepped out of a storm, but I could still hear the thunder behind me. The next morning my mother called. I didn't block her, of course. I couldn't. When I answered, her voice was soft, but there was something tense behind it. She asked if I was okay, but before I could answer, she started talking about Maya. She said Maya was devastated, that she had been crying all night, that her husband's health was the will of God, and that rejecting the request was equal to abandoning family in their time of need. It hurt to listen. I could hear the disappointment in her voice, even though she wasn't saying it directly. I wanted to explain everything, how the conversation made me feel pressured, how the request came out of nowhere, how I was still trying to even understand what donating a kidney truly meant. But my mother didn't really want to hear my side. She wanted a solution. She wanted harmony. In her eyes, family unity mattered more than individual feelings. So when I tried to explain, she interrupted softly and said, "Sometimes we have to sacrifice for the people we love." That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. It made me question myself. Was I really being selfish? Was I supposed to say yes no matter how I felt? Was love really proven through pain? For days I thought about those questions. I tried to push the situation aside and focus on my job, my daily routine, and the small things that usually brought me peace. But it was impossible to ignore. Every time I passed a mirror, I found myself wondering what it would mean to live with one kidney. Every time I went to sleep, I wondered what would happen if something went wrong. And in the quiet moments, I wondered why my sister didn't try to talk to me kindly, to share her emotions instead of demanding something from me. Then a cousin reached out to me. Someone who had always been neutral in family matters. She messaged me privately and asked if she could talk. I agreed. When we spoke, there was no pressure in her voice. No guilt. No demands. Instead, she told me something I didn't expect. She said that Maya hadn't just asked me because I was the best match. She asked me because I was the easiest to persuade. Or in her mind, the easiest to control. She said Maya had already asked her in-laws, her husband's brothers, and even one of his cousins. They all refused. Some claimed health issues, some said they needed to think, but underneath all of it, they simply did not want to risk their bodies for him. When they refused, Maya turned her attention fully to me. Because I was family. But not just family, family who rarely said no. Hearing that felt like someone had pulled a rug from under me. I realized I wasn't being chosen because I was loved. I was being chosen because I was convenient. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen with the lights off, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator. It felt like my whole life had been quietly leading up to this moment where I had to choose myself. I thought about all those years when Maya made decisions and expected everyone to bend around her. The birthdays she celebrated as if they were national holidays. The arguments she won simply by talking louder. The way our relatives always said, "That's just how she is," as if that excused everything. I never confronted it before. I always let things go. I always avoided conflict. But this time was different. A kidney wasn't something I could replace. My health wasn't something I could gamble on. And most importantly, I needed to understand why her husband needed a kidney in the first place. I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know his lifestyle, his medical history, or whether this situation was avoidable. And no one was offering answers. Days went by. My phone stopped ringing as much. The sudden silence felt unsettling. I didn't know whether everyone had given up, or whether they were planning something else. I tried to distract myself with work and routine, but the tension inside me remained. Then one afternoon I got a message from an unknown number. The message simply said, "We need to talk. It's important." I stared at the screen for a while. I didn't know whether it was Maya or someone else. I ignored it at first. But later that night I got another message. This time it said, "You don't know the full story. Please hear me out." Something in that message made my chest tighten. It didn't sound like Maya. It didn't sound emotional or manipulative. It sounded tired. Heavy. Like someone carrying a burden they were finally ready to share. Against my better judgment, I replied. We agreed to meet at a small cafe the next day. I sat there waiting, unsure of what I was walking into. I kept imagining different possibilities. Maybe it was one of Maya's friends trying to convince me, maybe it was my cousin again, maybe it was someone I didn't even know. I waited for 10 minutes, then 15. I almost stood up to leave. Then I saw him. A man approached my table. Thin, pale, and tired looking. He walked slowly, carefully, as if every step took energy. When he reached the table, he introduced himself softly. He said he was Maya's husband. The man I had never met. The man whose life suddenly involved mine in a way I never asked for. He sat down across from me with a quiet expression, like he had been carrying years of weight on his shoulders. And when he finally began to speak, what he said did not match anything my sister had told me. And that's where everything began to unravel. He sat down slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he rested them on the table. I noticed how tired his eyes looked, like he hadn't slept in days. He took a deep breath before speaking, as if gathering strength for every word. I didn't interrupt. I just watched him, waiting. Because for the first time I was about to hear his side of the story. He started by telling me his name. I had heard it before in passing conversations, but it sounded different when he said it himself. Then he told me about his illness, how his kidneys had been failing gradually for years. He explained that he had known about his condition before he married my sister, and that at the time he believed he could manage it with treatment and lifestyle changes. But things got worse faster than he expected. As he spoke, there was no arrogance, no expectation. He never once asked me to help him. In fact, he said repeatedly that he didn't want anyone to feel pressured into donating anything for him. He said he understood how serious surgery like this was, and that he would never want to ask someone who didn't willingly offer. He looked at me with this quiet sadness in his eyes and said, "I'm sorry you were dragged into this. You didn't deserve that." Those words hit me harder than I expected. The person being blamed for everything wasn't the one demanding anything. He wasn't the one guilt-tripping me. He wasn't the one calling relatives and turning the family against me. It was my sister who had taken it upon herself to push, to pressure, to demand a sacrifice that wasn't hers to request. He continued explaining how Maya had been taking care of him for months, how she had watched him get weaker, how she had panicked when doctors mentioned dialysis and transplant lists. It was clear she was scared, so scared that she couldn't think clearly. But fear doesn't excuse everything. Fear can make people desperate. And desperation can make people cross lines they shouldn't. I found myself torn. I felt sympathy for him. I really did. But I also felt anger, confusion, and something like betrayal twisting inside me. I asked him why Maya didn't just talk to me calmly. Why she didn't sit down and explain the situation step by step instead of demanding something so huge. He lowered his eyes, like he didn't want to answer. Finally, he said, "Because your sister is used to getting what she wants." He didn't say it in a cruel way. He said it like someone who had learned this lesson slowly, painfully. Someone who had come to understand who he married a little too late. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. The cafe sounds faded into the background. Cups clinking. Chairs shifting. Soft voices. None of it felt real. I could only hear my heartbeat in my ears. Then he told me something I wasn't expecting. He said that Maya had been hiding the truth of his condition from the rest of the family for a long time. That she didn't want anyone to see weakness in her household. That she wanted to maintain the image of a perfect marriage. So she had pretended everything was fine on the outside, while inside their home she was breaking down. And when the truth finally came out, she didn't know how to handle the shame of it. Suddenly, this wasn't just a medical crisis. It was pride. It was fear of judgment. It was the unwillingness to be seen as vulnerable. It was control. I didn't agree to anything during that conversation. And he didn't ask me to. When he stood up to leave, he said something that stayed with me long after he walked away. "You have every right to choose. Whatever you decide, it is your body and your life. No one has the right to take that away from you." I sat there long after he left, just thinking. My sister had told everyone that I was refusing to help save her husband's life. She had painted me as selfish, cold, and uncaring. But the man fighting for his life didn't see me that way. He saw me as a person. Something my sister had forgotten to do. That night, things got even more complicated. My mother called again, but this time her voice was shaking. She said Maya hadn't been home since the morning. That she left without telling anyone where she was going. My mother was worried. She asked if I had spoken to her. I didn't lie. I told her no. And I could feel my mother's fear through the phone. That fear wrapped itself around me too. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should reach out. Every part of me was still hurting from how my sister treated me. But I also didn't want anything bad to happen to her. I knew she was overwhelmed. I knew she was trying to keep her world from collapsing. And I knew she thought I was the person who could stop all of it. But I also knew this wasn't my responsibility to fix. Hours passed. I tried to sleep but couldn't. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept returning to the same questions. What if she did something impulsive? What if she was somewhere alone and breaking down? The worry pulled at me until I felt sick. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. A message came through from a number I didn't recognize again. For a moment, I just stared at it, afraid to open it. When I finally did, my breath caught. I know where she is. You need to come. Alone. No name. No explanation. Just that. My heart was pounding. I didn't know if this was a trap, a cry for help, or something worse. But something inside me told me I needed to go. Not just for her. Not just to stop the chaos. But to finally understand what had brought us to this moment. So I grabbed my keys. I walked out into the night. And I drove. Not knowing what I would find. Not knowing what she would say. Not knowing if everything between us was already too broken to repair. All I knew was that nothing about this story was simple. And whatever waited for me next was going to change everything again. I drove through the quiet streets with my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than I should have. The city felt different at night. Empty, wide, open in a way that made everything seem heavier. I didn't know where I was going yet, only that the address came through a few seconds later. It was a location on the outskirts of town, not too far but isolated enough that I immediately felt uneasy. I tried to slow my breathing but my mind was racing faster than the car. As I got closer, the roads became narrower and the streetlights fewer. It was the kind of place where the silence felt alive, almost watching. The address led to a small parking area near an old park. The kind with swings that creak in the wind and benches worn down by time. I pulled my car over and just sat there for a moment. I didn't see anyone. My heart thudded in my chest, too loud in the still night. Then I saw her. Maya was sitting on one of the benches, her back slightly hunched, her hair falling in messy strands around her face. There was no dramatic lighting, no crying or shouting. Just a quiet stillness. She looked small. Smaller than I had ever seen her. Like the fight had finally drained out of her. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She didn't turn around. She spoke without looking at me. I thought you wouldn't come. Her voice sounded different. Soft. Fragile. Not the tone I was used to from her. I sat beside her, but not too close. The cold air settled between us and for a while neither of us said anything. The silence was thick, but not empty. It was full of all the words we hadn't said over the past few weeks, maybe even years. Finally, she took a shaky breath. They told me he was getting worse. Her husband. The man I barely knew. The man I was being asked to save. She continued, her voice trembling like it was balancing on the edge of breaking. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to make anyone understand how desperate I was. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, the knuckles white. I could hear her breathing unevenly. She was holding everything in by a thread. I wanted to tell her I understood. But I didn't. Not fully. Not yet. So I waited. I know I forced it on you, she finally said. I know I made it sound like you didn't have a choice. I shouldn't have done that. Her voice cracked. But you have to understand. I'm scared. I'm scared of losing him. Hearing her say it aloud, her fear, her vulnerability, felt like something shifting between us. She had always been strong even when life wasn't easy. Seeing her like this, raw and open, made everything more complicated. I asked her quietly, why didn't you just talk to me? Why didn't you tell me everything? She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. Because I thought if I told you everything, you would say no. That sentence hung in the cold night air, heavy and painful. There it was. The truth she had been avoiding. The truth that sat between us all this time. She didn't trust me. Or maybe she didn't trust the idea that I could choose for myself. She turned to look at me then, her eyes slightly red. And in that moment I saw something I hadn't seen before. She didn't just see me as family. She saw me as her solution. Her safety net. The thing she believed should always be there when everything else failed. I didn't know how to respond. My emotions were tangled so tightly I couldn't find where one feeling ended and another began. Anger. Fear. Love. Guilt. Confusion. All of it wrapped around my ribs like they were squeezing the air out of me. Before I could speak, footsteps approached from behind us. I turned, expecting maybe a stranger or someone walking their dog, but it wasn't either. It was her husband. He walked slowly, leaning on the armrest of the bench as he approached. His breathing was shallow, like each inhale took effort. He sat down on her other side, and for a while, the three of us sat in silence. He didn't say much at first. He didn't try to defend Maya. He didn't try to convince me. He just apologized again, this time in a whisper. I know I'm the reason for all of this. There was no anger in his voice, just a tired acceptance. I've been sick for years, he said quietly. I knew there was always a chance things could get bad. But I didn't want Maya to carry all of it alone. I didn't want her to feel like she needed to beg anyone to help me. Maya shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I wasn't begging, she said softly. I was fighting. He looked at her, sorrow filling his tired eyes. There's a difference between fighting and forcing. The words settled like a weight over all three of us. The tension in the air didn't break, it grew. We were no closer to a decision. No closer to peace. But everything was out in the open now. All the fear. All the desperation. All the pain. And the truth was clear. This wasn't just about a kidney anymore. It was about what we all meant to each other. What we owed each other. What love looks like when it's pushed to its limits. We left the park without a resolution. Without promises. Without forgiveness. Just with the knowledge that something had to give soon. Either a decision would be made, or everything between us would shatter. When I drove home, the night felt heavier than before. The road stretched out endlessly ahead, and somewhere deep in my chest, I knew the story wasn't reaching its end yet. It was reaching the moment everything would break. The moment where one choice would change everything. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look, every pause from the conversation at the park. The silence of my room felt loud. I kept thinking about my sister's voice when she said she was scared. And her husband's whisper, apologizing for being the reason our family was falling apart. Nothing about any of this felt simple anymore. I wanted to understand everything. Really understand. Not just react to emotion or pressure. So the next morning, I made a decision I hadn't even considered before. I called the hospital. Not to schedule anything. Not to agree. But to ask questions. To get facts. Not guilt, not assumptions, not fear. When I got through to the transplant coordinator, I explained who I was. She sounded calm and professional. She pulled up the records. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told me there were no compatibility tests showing that I was a match. Not even one. I felt my whole body go still. I asked her again, thinking I misunderstood. Maybe the tests were pending. Maybe the records weren't updated. But she checked again and confirmed the same thing. No tests had ever been requested in my name. No blood work. No screenings. Nothing. That meant my sister didn't know whether I was a match at all. She didn't even check. She just assumed. Or worse, she didn't care whether I was a match. She just wanted me to try so she wouldn't have to consider any other options. I hung up the phone slowly, my thoughts spinning. I sat there on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. A wave of realization rolled through me. This wasn't just desperation. This wasn't just fear. This was something else. Before I could even process what I'd learned, my phone buzzed with another message. This time it was my cousin again. She asked if I could come to her house. She said there was something I needed to see. Her tone was different, serious in a way that sent a chill through me. I drove over right away. When I arrived, my cousin didn't greet me with small talk. She didn't even offer tea like she always did. She just led me straight to her living room and handed me her phone. It's better you hear this from me than in a worse way later, she said. On the screen was a voice note. From Maya. I didn't want to listen. My heart felt heavy just seeing her name. But my cousin nodded gently, urging me. I pressed play. At first, all I heard was my sister crying. Not loud or dramatic. Quiet crying. The kind someone does when they're exhausted. Then her voice broke through, shaky and uneven. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like everything is collapsing. He's getting weaker. The bills are piling up. I can't work more hours. I can't ask his family, they've already refused. They won't help. They think this is my responsibility because I married him. I can't lose him. I can't. I won't. If I have to beg my own sibling, I'll do it. I don't care if they hate me. I need him alive. I need him. Her voice cracked again. I didn't tell her the whole truth. I didn't tell anyone. I can't. If they knew the real reason his kidneys failed, they'd never help. They'd say he deserved it. They'd say I married the wrong person. They'd say I ruined my life. The voice note ended abruptly. I felt my throat tighten. There it was. The part no one had said out loud. The part my sister was holding like a secret burning her hands. I looked at my cousin. Her expression told me she already knew. There was more. She hesitated, then said carefully, "There's something about his medical history. Something Maya hid." I didn't speak. I just waited. She continued slowly, choosing each word with care. His kidney failure wasn't just because of genetics or bad luck. He used to drink a lot. Like, really a lot. For years. Bad habits that damaged his health. Everyone on his side of the family knows. That's why they refuse to donate. They think he brought this on himself. The room felt like it tilted for a moment. So this wasn't a sudden tragedy. This wasn't just fate being cruel. This was years of self-destruction. Years my sister had to witness. Years she tried to fix. And now she was drowning under the weight of it. And she wanted me to save him. Not because I was a match. Not because I was chosen with care. But because I was the last person who hadn't yet said no. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was angry. Angry that this was hidden. Angry that I was expected to sacrifice without being trusted with the truth. Another part of me felt an ache for her. For how alone she must have felt. Holding on to a secret like that could break anyone. But there was something else too. Something darker. Because if his own family refused based on what they knew, what would this do to mine? As I sat there, trying to breathe through everything I had just learned, my cousin placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "You need to be careful," she said softly. "This isn't just about the surgery anymore. If you say no, the blame won't just stay between you and Maya. Everyone will choose sides. And once that happens, there's no going back." I nodded slowly. Because I already knew. This was no longer just a choice. This was the moment everything in our family history could fracture. This was the kind of moment people remembered for generations. And the worst part? I still hadn't made a decision. But something deep inside me whispered that whatever happened next, it was going to happen soon. Very soon. The days that followed felt like walking through thick fog. Every thought was heavy. Every decision felt like it could break something permanently. I kept thinking about my sister alone on that bench, about her husband's fragile voice, about the truth that had been hidden like a locked room no one was supposed to open. It all came together in this tangled web that I couldn't escape. But life doesn't slow down just because you're overwhelmed. It keeps moving, dragging you forward whether you're ready or not. One evening my mother called again. This time her voice was small. She told me my sister's husband had been admitted to the hospital. His condition had worsened faster than anyone expected. He was weak, barely conscious. She asked me to come. Not to donate. Not to decide. Just to come. And something inside me knew I had to go. When I arrived, the hospital air felt cold and sharp, the kind that always smells like antiseptic and sadness. My mother was in the hallway, her eyes tired and red. She didn't scold me. She didn't say anything about right or wrong. She just hugged me. And in that hug, I realized she was scared too, not of sides or judgment, but of loss. We went into his room. He lay there, thinner now, his breathing slow and uneven. Maya was sitting beside him, holding his hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. When she saw me, she didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with this hollow exhaustion I had never seen in her. I sat down across from her. The room was quiet except for the machines. After a moment, she whispered, "I didn't want you to find out like this." There was no defensiveness in her voice anymore. No force. No demand. Just honesty, raw and painful. "I wasn't trying to trap you," she continued. "I was just terrified. When the doctor said he might not have much time, I felt like the world was collapsing. I didn't know how to lose him. I didn't know how to breathe without him. And I thought if I tried hard enough, I could stop it." Her words cracked at the end. I nodded, my voice soft. "I know you were scared. But you didn't give me the chance to choose. You didn't trust me to understand." She lowered her head, her shoulders shaking. For the first time in this entire situation, it felt like we were finally seeing each other, past the panic, past the pressure, past the noise. And then I stood up. I walked out of the room and went down to the transplant department. I asked to speak with the coordinator again. She found the file, opened it, and looked at me with careful eyes. I told her I was ready to be tested. Not to donate. Not yet. But to know. Because making a decision in fear is different than making one in understanding. And for the first time, I wanted to understand everything clearly. She drew blood, explained the process, and told me the results would come back in a few hours. Those were the longest hours of my life. I sat outside in the hospital courtyard, watching the sky shift colors as day turned to evening. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was just breathing. For the first time since this started, I felt strangely calm. Finally, the coordinator came to find me. She sat down beside me and spoke gently. "You're not a match." I closed my eyes. There it was. The choice I had been agonizing over. The guilt I had been drowning in. The pressure that had turned my life upside down. None of it mattered anymore. I couldn't donate even if I wanted to. I let out a long breath that felt like releasing weeks of held tension. When I went back to the room, Maya looked up at me with hope, fear, and confusion all tangled together. I sat down beside her and took her hand, something I hadn't done in years. "I got tested," I said softly. Her eyes widened. She held her breath. "I'm not a match." The words landed slowly. Her face didn't crumble. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She just closed her eyes and nodded, tears slipping down silently. She whispered, "Thank you for trying." Her husband, weak but awake now, opened his eyes. He looked at me with gratitude I'll never forget. "Thank you for seeing me as a person," he said quietly. We didn't talk about guilt. We didn't talk about blame. We didn't talk about debts or expectations. We simply sat there, finally on the same side of the truth. And just when I thought the story had reached its ending, when everything felt settled in a quiet, painful acceptance, the doctor walked in. He explained that the transplant list review had just been updated. A match had been found. Not from family. Not from pressure. Not from desperate searches. From the National Donor Registry. His voice shook when he said it. A chance. A real one. Maya covered her face with her hands, crying in relief. Her husband's shoulders fell back against the pillow like the weight of the world had lifted for just a moment. And I just sat there, still holding her hand. The twist wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a miracle out of nowhere. It was simply a reminder. Sometimes the answers don't come from force or fear or sacrifice. Sometimes they come when you finally let go. In the end, I didn't lose my family. I didn't lose myself. And I didn't have to give away a part of my body to prove love. I only had to show up. And let the truth breathe. The days after the match was found felt like stepping into a different world. The fear didn't disappear completely, but it softened, like a shadow that no longer touched everything. The hospital staff moved quickly, preparing for the transplant. There were tests, consultations, medical briefings. It was all overwhelming, yet for the first time in weeks, there was hope instead of panic. I stayed close not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to. It felt right to be there. Maya and I talked more during those days than we had in the last few years combined. We talked about childhood memories, the times when we were inseparable, long before responsibilities and adulthood hardened parts of us. It reminded me that she was still my sister, the same girl who used to share secrets with me under blankets at night, whispering about dreams we were too shy to say out loud during the day. Her husband remained calm even though we all knew he was scared. But he had a quiet strength about him, one that didn't shout but was steady and grounding. Every time he looked at Maya or at any of us, it wasn't with desperation. It was with gratitude. As if he was thankful simply for being loved. When the day of the transplant came, we all gathered in the waiting area. Maya squeezed my hand so tightly that it almost hurt, but I didn't pull away. My mother sat beside us holding a small prayer book. Even though she didn't say much, I could tell her heart was full of worry, relief, love, and probably guilt for the pressure she had put on me earlier. I didn't blame her. Fear makes people cling to whatever seems possible, even when it hurts others. She was trying to save her family the only way she knew how. Hours passed slowly. Time in hospitals doesn't move like regular time. Every minute feels stretched thin like it could snap. Finally, the surgeon came out. He had that expression doctors get when they're trying to stay professionally neutral, but a small smile still pushed through. The transplant had gone well. Maya covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. My mother bowed her head, whispering a prayer under her breath. I felt my eyes sting too, but I blinked it back. Sometimes the relief is so strong that the only way to hold it is to be still. The recovery process was long but steady. A few days later, when he was awake and clear, he asked to see the donor's family to write them a letter. He wanted them to know that their loved one's final act had given him another chance to live. The hospital arranged it. When the letter was finally written, Maya cried again, but this time it was different. It was a soft, grateful kind of crying, gentle like rain. As he got stronger, the atmosphere around us changed. It became lighter. We began to smile again, not forced but naturally. We found ourselves laughing at small things like hospital food mishaps or the way he rolled his eyes when the nurses insisted he try standing for the first time. It felt like life was slowly returning to us, filling in the spaces fear had hollowed out. In all of this, something quietly mended between me and Maya. It wasn't dramatic. There were no big speeches. Just small moments where we saw each other differently. We apologized not through words but through presence. Through choosing to stay. Through holding on instead of letting distance win. One evening, when things had stabilized, Maya and I sat outside near the hospital garden. The sky was a deep blue, the kind that arrives just before night. We didn't say anything for a long time. Then she turned to me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. "I know I hurt you," she said. "And I know I pushed you in a way I shouldn't have. I was desperate and I didn't think clearly. But you stayed. You didn't disappear. Thank you for that." I took a breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle into something I could finally carry. "I stay because you're my sister," I said. "Even when we're angry. Even when we misunderstand each other. That doesn't change." She leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when we were younger. In that moment, everything felt simple again. When her husband was finally discharged from the hospital, we all went back home. Life didn't immediately snap back into place. There were medicines, follow-up appointments, and moments of lingering fear. But there was also laughter, shared meals, warm conversations. Real healing isn't instant. It's a slow, steady return to yourself. One afternoon, a few weeks after everything, we all gathered at their home. The sun was bright and the air was warm. Her husband stood on the porch, a little thinner but smiling, really smiling. He thanked everyone for being there. But then he looked at me and his voice caught slightly. "I want to say something," he said, placing a hand over his chest. "Thank you for being there even when you didn't have to be. Family isn't about blood alone. It's about choosing each other even in the hardest moments. And you chose us." His words stayed with me. Later, when I walked home, I realized how much this experience had changed me. Not just in how I saw my family, but in how I understood love. Love isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't always look like sacrifice. Sometimes it looks like simply being there, quietly, consistently, even when it's painful. I learned that boundaries don't mean you don't care. They mean you care enough to be honest. I learned that fear can twist love into something heavy, but love can also untangle fear if we let it. And I learned that sometimes, the thing we think we must carry alone is actually meant to be carried together. Life moved forward. Slowly, gently, beautifully. And even though things would never return to the exact way they were before, that was okay. Because now, our bond was real. Not out of obligation, not out of pressure, but out of understanding. In the end, we didn't lose each other. We found our way back.